Hi, and welcome to a special World on Fire episode of InstaVision. So I thought international problems were a thing of the past now that we have smart diplomacy, a relic of the 80s and the Bush administration. But now we've got Russia invading the Ukraine, we've got unrest in Venezuela, we've got ongoing bloody geopolitical conflict in Syria, and more. Well, who better to help us figure it out than Austin Bay? He's a retired Army colonel who served a tour in Iraq last in 2004. He's teaches a course in strategy at the University of Texas in Austin. He's the author of A Quick and Dirty Guide to War with Jim Dunnigan and Ataturk, a biography of Kemal Ataturk. Just an all-around cool guy. He's also an entrepreneur who started a new company, the Venture Connection and Innovation Network. So great to have you here, Austin. With those credentials, I'll just sit back and let you explain everything. Really, let's start with Ukraine. Why has Putin done what he did, and how much further is he likely to go? Is he going to try to seize the whole enchilada?
Great question, Glenn. There are a lot of people trying to figure out exactly what Putin's long-range goals are. There's been a lot of debate about it. Starting out after the Soviet Union collapse, there were a lot of people that thought at some point a very strong Russian leader will try to at least recapture Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, and with Russia, that becomes a superpower. The thing about the Ukraine situation now, it smacks to me of hastiness. I think Putin was surprised by what happened after Yanukovych, his henchmen killed somewhere between 80 and 100 demonstrators in Kiev, and then the Ukraine parliament votes him out of power. He's surprised by that because Yanukovych was his man. And what does he respond? How does he react? Well, he acts by invading Crimea. Now he's got it.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton actually compared this with Hitler's annexing the Sudetenland, but you say this is more like when he entered the Rhineland. Why is that? What's the difference?
Well, look, historical analogs are always weak. They break it at some point. What I found curious about comparing it to the Sudetenland was, heck, what precedes the absorption of the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia? That's the Munich Agreement. And the Munich Agreement was a sellout to Hitler's expansionist aspirations. Where he really makes his break, I'm talking about Hitler now, is when he shatters the Versailles Treaty. That's March 1936, when the Germans remilitarized the Rhineland. And the Germans had a historic claim to German territory. It was taken from them by Versailles. So what does he do? He makes the move using weak military forces and reveals the West to be weak. I see more of a similarity to the situation that obtained in Crimea, because a very weak Russian force managed to achieve great gains by acting in surprise. And also Putin managed to shatter an agreement that he does not like, which is that 1994 Budapest Agreement, which assured Ukraine's territorial integrity in exchange for Ukrainian nukes. Bill Clinton signed it.
Yeah, I was thinking if I were Ukraine, I'd start floating rumors that I'd held a dozen or so back. With Russian accounting, that would have been believable. Well, what can the West do realistically to pressure Putin successfully? Anything?
Well, I'll tell you what. There were Russians right after the Soviet Union broke up that objected to the loss of Crimea. They said it was traditional Russian territory. Now, you go back a few centuries, Turks might dispute that, but it was attached to Ukraine administratively by Khrushchev in 1954. So, but there has been a long-term Russian desire to return Crimea to full Russian authority. He's got that. I think that's one thing he wants. It reinforces his position domestically, and it's certainly valuable military terrain. That's with Sevastopol. That's another loose comparison to the Rhineland remilitarization, at least in my thinking there. I don't think he's going to give it up. Sanctions can hurt him, and I'm talking about economic sanctions, some of the targeted sanctions going after Russian crony billionaires. I think those would have a political effect on it ultimately, but there's also the chance that sanctions rebound both on the sanctioners, because our economies are very integrated, and also the Russian people respond by saying, well, we'll just tough it out because we want to keep Crimea.
So I joked about the Ukrainians, but on a more serious note, if you're the Poles or even, heck, the Lithuanians, are you starting to want nuclear weapons now?
Glenn, let's hope not. uh, what they would like, and I think the Poles are an example of this. This is not a new desire by the Poles. I had a long conversation actually with a Polish colonel in 2004 in Iraq about he was the chief of staff of the Polish division. I did a lot of liaison work in the Polish division, talking about long-term Polish aspirations. They want reassurances. And reassurances with the West really ultimately come from Washington. They want leadership from Washington, Washington assurance that we, the Poles, are not isolated anymore. I mean, the Poles would say about World War II, hey, we're a Western country. We're caught between Germany and Russia. Okay, well, that's a knock at Germany. But they certainly do face Russia. And Ukraine, of course, is their buffer. But that they don't need nuclear weapons if they have firm relationships with NATO, they're NATO members, but the solidifying component of that is a firm relationship with the United States and a United States that's willing to act. I think that applies to the Balts as well. I also think it applies to Romania and Bulgaria.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying is, given that so far the United States response has been pretty weak, I think if I'm the Poles, my reliance on Washington is going to feel less comfortable, and I'm going to look at ways that give me some sort of independent ability to deter an invasion. And that's, of course, doubly, triply, quintuply true if Putin moves beyond the Crimea to take all or part of Ukraine.
Well, look, that is I think for Putin, that would be a reach too far. Russian forces are not the bear they were in the Cold War. I think you would see a strong reaction by Eastern European NATO nations. I think you would see something that would be historically disturbing for a lot of Europeans, but at this point in time would be might be welcomed, and that is a strong German leadership. Angela Merkel has given some indication that she could react that way, and you'd see the French react as well. One of the pressure points that I've been concerned about for a number of years, and there's a long section in the last edition of A Quick and Dirty Guide to War about Moldova and Transnistria, because you have a miniature there in Moldova of the Ukraine situation. The Russians have made trouble in Moldova, just like they have in Ukraine. That, I think, is more the way that Putin will continue to put pressure on Ukraine and other Eastern European countries, is playing the Russian ethnic card. And there are some other smaller ethnic groups that have a pro-Russian tradition.
Well, let's move from Ukraine to Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is blaming his problems on America. He was actually attacking Joe Biden, which I'm sure made Joe Biden feel important at least. But does Obama really want to bring Maduro down? They seem like soul brothers to me.
Well, Hugo Chavez is dead. Long live Chavismo. Maduro is, well, I called him a fourth-rate caudillo, and he's a first-rate thug. Which is one reason that he was Chavez's designated successor. He lacks Hurricane Hugo's charisma. He just does not have the media snap. I know this sounds so weird. I've read this in several places, and Glenn, you know all about the stuff that passes around on the internet, but Maduro claims he hears from Chavez's spirit giving him directions. He shows up in the form of a bird, and I speculated in a recent column that, hey, Chavez was a paratrooper wings, who knows? Maduro is a crook, fundamentally, and you're dealing with an extremely corrupt regime that has ransacked the Venezuelan people. This is not only a political revolt, and it is, but it's an economic revolt. It's a revolt against a kleptocracy. Maduro is someone, though, who I know would use secret police. He has used secret police. I just hope it doesn't come into a bloodbath.
Well, that's very encouraging. All right, Syria remains a debacle, and nobody seems to care. I mean, we were told for a while in September that it was the most important foreign policy issue on the planet. Then Putin sort of yanked the rug out from under Obama, or maybe we should say gave him an off-ramp. And then everybody just stopped talking about it. But meanwhile, people are still dying by the thousands and fleeing by the millions. And it's looking actually quite ugly. Where is that heading?
Well, look, Syria is a disaster. I'm going to give my friend Jim Dunnigan some credit. I want to say it was April of 2011, maybe May of 2011, that he says, hey, Syria is already a war of attrition. And that has been a continual theme I've seen crop up throughout the media. At one time, Assad was losing. You saw the shadow war that goes on in Syria between NATO and Iran. There was enough NATO action, NATO interest, U.S., Turkey, France, that the rebels made some headway. Unfortunately, after the Red Line fiasco, where you see the West revealed as being weak again, at least in the person of the American president, Barack Obama, Assad got definitely a political second and third win, and Putin got a good laugh. I'm certain of it. Several things happened with that failure to enforce the red line on the use of nerve gas. You get, again, the political second wind for Assad, the Iranians saying that, hey, we're going to get away with this. And the other collapse, which this may seem minor, Glenn, but look, you're talking about 100,000 people dead. And Samantha Power, who is the current UN ambassador for the Obama administration, made her bones with what's R2P, responsibility to protect. And boy, ultimately that's shown to be a hollow charge just to impugn Republican administrations, because responsibility to protect, a classic scenario would be when a dictatorship uses nerve gas on its own people, and they fail to act. So you've got a complex here, and whether the American major media understands it or not, our opponents, adversaries, and our enemies do. They see this, a senior member of the administration who was sold in a major way, vetted as a potential Peace Prize winner for responsibility to protect. They don't even follow through on that. So it's, I'm not the only person by a long shot that sees that red line debacle as a huge mistake. The French, there's a French general by the name of Deportes who, in a Le Mans interview in August of 2013, said, look, we look so weak. And he blamed it, the flip-flop, the volte-face, as he put it, on Obama. And he says, this hurts. It's like the 1930s.
Yeah, well, that's the theme that seems to keep coming up, isn't it? Well, exit question. There's lots of stuff going on around the world. There's Libya, there's China, and the various coastal islands and stuff. What other spots should we be watching? Or should we just be hiding out in the basement with shotguns and canned goods?
Well, look, it was a complete falsehood that to try to sell the American people that George Bush was the problem, the war starter, the fellow that made America, raised enmity towards America around the planet. There's a lot of enmity to America all the time because we're so big and ultimately we're so successful. We're also expected to be leaders, whether we like it or not. That was one of the French complaints after the Red Line fiasco of last August. The sad truth about the world is that we are in constant conflict. I write a lot about sub-Saharan Africa. I've spent a lot of time working on issues in sub-Saharan Africa. And Glenn, right now, depending on how you parse it, it's easily between about 150 and 200 ongoing armed conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa. How do you, when I said parse them, some of them, 20 of them all interrelate because they're in an area, and Eastern Congo was a good example of a nest of tangled tribal and political conflicts, economic conflicts as well. It goes on all the time. Now, the difficulty is in deciding how you engage them. Many of these you can't. Critical interests, when critical interests are challenged, you have to stand up. I will tell you, Ukraine's territorial integrity and how Crimea is resolved, that is of extraordinary interest to the long-term stability of Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and vital American interests as well. I guess the bottom line on this is, like, if you want to, there are a bunch of websites. I'll push strategy page. Al Nofi, Jim Dunnigan, and I do try to cover as many of the conflicts that are ongoing now. The good news is that there are actually statistically fewer conflicts, certainly fewer major conflicts, going on right now than there were 40 years ago, but there's still a lot of them.
Well, let's hope that represents a trend and not just the pause before the storm. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us about all of this, Austin.
Hey, Glenn, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And that's Austin Bay. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel who last served in Iraq in 2004. He's the author of Ataturk and, with Jim Dunnigan, A Quick and Dirty Guide to War. And he is now an entrepreneur who started a new company, the Venture Connection and Innovation Network. We'll have to have him back sometime to talk about that. Thanks to all of you for taking the time to tune in today. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.